What up, ladies and gentlemen? Here with another awesome interview. Super excited for this one because we actually have some connections that I didn't know of until like a day ago when I called a friend of mine, Norm Westberg,
Oh my
and
goodness.
we were talking about just life, and he brings up this band that very familiar, Luna Honey, and I'm wondering, where have I heard this? Oh wait, I know, awesome band, new album just out and super excited for this interview. We need to discuss that for sure because he was definitely very happy. He was telling me about how you guys worked together in the past and whatever, and we had a great chat. So, welcome, Miss Pond. How you doing?
Doing good, doing good. That's so I'm glad you got a chance to catch up with Norman. He's a sweetheart.
He's great. I think that was the first Swans interview I ever did. It was either him or Thor, and he was such a sweetheart to talk to, and
Yeah.
I've stayed in touch with him, and exciting because I'll get to speak to him again, like on press, like for press in about 6 months for the new Swans record, which is super
Oh,
exciting.
cool. Yeah, I'm also very excited about that one.
So how did you like meet Norm? How did you guys start collaborating? Because that is like super weird. I mean, from my perspective, but also like really fun because he's awesome.
Yeah, it's you know, I feel like the details are like slightly hazy for me because I first saw him in person at a show at City Winery in DC. He was uh he was playing with DBUK doing his solo work. I like fell in love with um his solo work. And then during the pandemic, I was having kind of rough period, and my mom had passed, and I was grieving, and I had some of his CDs that I had picked up at that show that I was just listening to on repeat, and just like really finding that they were helping. And I think I bought like a bunch of extra stuff, and he just sent me a nice message and said that he'd also checked out our music, and that would we want to do something, kind of abstractly. And um, I think I was very excited because I'm a big fan. And yeah, so that's kind of how that got kicked off.
Awesome. Yeah, and he's so humble, right? Like reaching out like that,
Oh yeah,
extremely beautiful.
I thought someone was pranking me, or it was a different person at first. And then I think I was very nervous. Which in hindsight, he's just very kind. So that was probably misplaced nervousness, but it's it's really cool to kind of be in a position where every now and then you bump into these people that you've been looking up to for a while. And then strange when you realize that they're actual humans that you can talk to.
Exactly.
Very nice.
It is so surreal because
Yeah.
I first started my correspondence with Norm about an interview, literally the day I got on my first time being on a cruise, because my mom's always wanted to go on a cruise. And so we had like no Wi-Fi, and I only had like
Yeah.
10 minutes of being able to message people. And for some reason, Norman was responded to my emails then perfect, and Brant of Caius and
Mm.
LSD and Search for God,
Oh
Annie.
wow.
So like all these bands finally started responding to my emails. The one time I couldn't respond to any emails.
Yeah.
And so it was really like scary because I didn't want to lose any of these interviews. And
Yeah.
but I got him and he's awesome.
Awesome. Yeah.
And then, Bound, which is super exciting. I've been definitely enjoying it, listening little parts, the whole album. It's all just it's perfect. So do you want to run me through like kind of the inspiration for the album?
Sure. Well, this is the first. So I've got two bandmates. There's Bencher, and then Levi Fleck. And for the most part, Ben plays guitar, and for the most part, Levi plays bass. But we all kind of switch stuff up on the records and things. And this is really the first album that we've been able to make like together, where we've all been living in one city since before the pandemic. We had all moved to different places, and we did put out there's Aftermath, the one we did with Norman, but that was like remote working. And then Ben and I lived together, so we had that down. But and then Parables was remote. You know, Levi, we were trying to kind of do the like we were down in Richmond and then he was up in Philadelphia and we were doing these like with traffic that's like it can be like a 5 to 7 hour drive depending, right? So it's just like, this is um it's like 4.5 hours on a good day, but like somehow band practice was never on a good day. So just got really old. I was like, it's so nice to be back in one space together. And I think we really wanted to try to capture the kind of noisier songs on the album are really trying to capture that. And we wanted to sort of strip down like when you're working remotely and everything, you can get really, and also just our natural inclinations, you can start to really get wild with how you're going to produce things, like throw in a bunch of instruments just because you can, and you're having fun and getting carried away, and no one's necessarily there telling you to stop editing. Um, so we wanted to strip this one down a little bit, try to keep it a little rawer. So the loud ones, I think, are like louder and kind of noisier, but also the quiet ones are maybe a little more, there's less happen. They're a little more minimal than they probably would have been before. And I think wanted to kind of retain a vulnerability there and not try to fill a whole song up and kind of just let it be the song.
I think that's definitely one of the highlights for the whole album, that kind of stripped back and very organic feeling. Because I know I get it, like adding a bunch to a certain song feels so much fun. And I think there's plenty of instances where it does work out, especially in your catalog. But it is sometimes really beautiful just to keep it at its bare bones and keep it very minimal. Even though minimal for like a band like Luna Honey is still kind of like
Yeah.
amazing and impressive and big.
There's still a lot happening in a lot of the
Yeah.
songs. So
But for sure, and just like we were talking, you had your release parties and release shows, which I'm sure were very, very fun. Now, what's like the next steps for, I guess, would it be touring the album, which I know can be hard as a band of your size, or maybe playing more like local shows, or
yeah, we have been trying to play more locally, I think. You know, it's funny. I think we probably should be booking a tour right now, but the thing that we're actually really excited to do is start working on the next record. Like we took a little longer with this one just process wise, which I think was good, but as a result, it feels like it's been a really long time. I know we've put out basically an album a year, but somehow this because these were there was overlapping, this feels like stuff we've been working on for like 2 years, so it feels like okay, like let's get some new stuff together. So I think
Mhm.
December we're kind of taking a break and taking like a songwriting break, right, where it's like gonna like sit down, like pull out the old notebook, like write a bunch of lyrics, that kind of thing. And then head into like January and February and start trying to record some demos. And then, yeah, I think also try to figure out like when the next tour is going to be. So if anybody has strong feelings about us heading your way, like let me know. I'll work that in there.
Well, I mean, I'm in Atlanta and I'd love to see you guys, but I know
Yeah.
that the biggest problem with Atlanta in our venues is that all the smaller, more intimate, and honestly more like beautiful venues are all 21 plus, which like
Yeah, yeah,
kills me. But
yeah.
I'm counting down the days. I just turned 15 yesterday.
Uh,
So, but we have like 6 more years. So,
Yeah, no, we ran into that with I wasn't even thinking about that with our album release, and I ran into some younger fans, and I was like, oh, I handed them a flyer, and then I realized that they couldn't come. But there's some great DIY spots up here too. We do try to kind of spread it out to like house spots and things. We kind of came out of that whole scene in DC, so I have a strong appreciation for the importance of house spaces, especially for like younger folks.
for sure, the DIY scene is on it's like the coolest part of music right now. And like you see all your friends at like this basement show and
Yeah.
it's like it's hot and stuffy and like he's giving like a crumpled up $5 bill and it's like it's also cool and fun. And I think a highlight, like you said, a highlight of just music scenes everywhere. What was like your favorite DIY venue in DC?
Ooh, that's a hard one because there were a lot. Because I went to ones before I was in a band. Gosh, my favorite. There was one called the Red Door that was like you'd have to I think if I was a band, it wouldn't have been my favorite because there was a spiral staircase that you had to load all your gear up through
Oh,
to get to. But as a audience member going, you could kind of go up this like spiral staircase in this warehouse and then like sit up on this loft and like look out at the bands that were playing. And there's this like long, scary ladder that went through darkness that you could like climb up and then get on the roof. It was really nice. I think it's like condos now though, so that's not
uh,
there anymore. But and then Ben ran a space called the Beehive that I feel like if I don't say that's my favorite, then I'll be in trouble.
that's so cool though. Like running a DIY venues on my list of like one day things to do. And like Oliver Ackerman from A Place to Raise Strangers used to have this massive space where he'd hold shows. And sadly, that's also kind of gone. But that's so cool. Like the idea of running your own venue.
Yeah, finding ways to make that happen is like the most important thing for like younger folks to be doing as far as I'm concerned because like there is a real value to being able to come out in person to places that like you own and can kind of like set the terms for. So like that's the incubator for so many exciting things that come later. Like I really dread to think like what would happen if those spaces totally disappeared.
For sure. And like what I've been wanting to do for a while now, and I think it may happen, is try to get some bigger bands that I know, and then like a lot of local bands, and do like a charity festival or something.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, because Mastodon is local to Atlanta, and I'm sure they'll be completely willing to do it. And there's a couple bands that are touring that may be able to like make their way down here. Like, I'm trying to think, it'd be a pain in the butt to do with booking and everything,
Yeah.
but like that would be really cool.
Yeah, well, I say go for it, man. Dream big.
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate it. All right, so then with touring and
Yeah.
specifically because you guys are like I said, one of the more intimate venue kind of bands. If you guys are to book a tour, would it be headlining bars and stuff, or would you prefer a almost like a supporting slot? Like you guys could definitely support Swans on their next outing. Like
That
that
would
could
be great.
definitely
Um,
you guys fit perfectly in that like category, I think
yeah,
at
I'm
least.
always just like happy to play wherever there's an audience that wants to hear the music. Like
Mm,
that's really the main thing, and that it's not a it could be to five enthusiastic people. I'd rather play to five enthusiastic people than 200 people who like don't care and like, hate the music, right? So like um that's kind of what it's about for me. It's just I like the spaces. I like the kind of connection with people, and I know some people are really into kind of like aggressively they get like amped up by like the opposition of like, oh, this crowd's against us and we're gonna turn them. And I'm not quite I leave the confrontation like in the music. Like I think I want people to want to be there. So
I think that's definitely real, especially because sometimes at gigs I've been to, it really saddens me that there's like not people there to see this awesome local band.
yeah.
Um, to King Gizzard, which was literally a week ago from tomorrow. Um, there was this band from Australia, like this Aboriginal band playing, and they were awesome, but there's only like I want to say 200 people there, which is a lot, but like for a 6,000 person venue,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
no one,
Yeah.
and it just disheartened me. I totally get that for sure. But I mean, I take aggression and confront, confrontation in the music
Hmm.
is so much better, like in the music, than like getting punched by some stage member. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, if they deserve it, then but
Well, it makes for good stories. And then, so you guys had already won awesome collaboration or collaborative record.
Mhm.
Would you want to do another one? And if so, who would be your artist of choice if you could pick from anyone in the world?
Oh, oh gosh, that's a good question. Like to do another one with Norman, maybe. Um, I We had there's a local we've talked about doing a split maybe with a local band here called Evangelism, who's like really, really good.
That's a cool
Uh
name.
I feel like I probably should have like a list of like people that I would love to work with. But I think my mind melted at that question because there's
Yeah,
so
yeah.
cool people out there.
You know what I'd like to see?
Mm.
Allison's Halo.
Oh,
That would be really interesting to see what happens, like those two creative forces coming together.
I'm gonna have to go and like listen after this and like keep that in mind and kind of visualize what that would look like.
Yeah. I imagine it being very fuzzy and loud and probably less obnoxious, like obnoxious in a good way, in a very good way. You know what I mean? But I think definitely toned down a little bit,
Mm.
but very interesting, you know?
Yeah, it's collaborating with people is I haven't done very much of it. And it's a fun challenge because like I'm pretty opinionated and as my and I like to kind of have things my way. But like it's good to not always do that. Like you know, it's good to kind of have to listen to what someone else's intent is and then mold yourself to that. I think it's a good exercise to kind
Mhm.
of keep yourself open and not to just like festering in your own juices. I mean, you do that within a band like all the time, but you get kind of so used to doing it within the band. I think you develop sort of patterns of how you deal with each other, right? So when you work with somebody else outside, it does kind of break that up. It shakes things up a little bit. And I think it's really good for like the creative process, even if it's like a little uncomfortable. Like some people are, I think, really good at it because they're probably ultimately more flexible, and maybe less stubborn.
I
Like,
mean, like stubborn's like the name of the game, though. Like if you know
yeah,
what you want and you know how to get it, you know?
yeah.
And I think I agree with you. That's the hardest thing about working with other people, especially where like musicians and people in the music scene, like I'm a journalist, you know? And
Mhm.
sometimes it's like I don't really want to do this the way the publicist wants me to do this. Like I don't want to do a 20-minute or like a 15-minute interview because I'm gonna get one question and then we're gonna
Yeah,
like yap and then it's gonna be over. Or
yeah,
sometimes they want to do like multimedia, and that's fine, but like it takes away from it, you know what I mean?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
it's not the same, but pushing yourself to those extremes is definitely like an interesting challenge,
yeah.
no matter how it turns out. It's just kind of like it's there, it's real, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah. Yeah, you can't ride in your comfort zone forever. Like I think it's really good to know have a clear vision for like where you're driving and what you want and like what your lines that you are and aren't willing to cross are, but like it's never good to be like totally inflexible, right?
Of course. And I mean, in especially the type of music that you guys make, where there is kind of no name to it. Some people say gothic, some people would say like industrial, but there is kind of no label for it. I feel like you're always experimenting, right? You're always kind of out of the comfort zone, at least a little bit.
Yeah, we I think as soon as I sort of figure out like some way to talk about the band, then we manage to shift into that not being appropriate anymore. It's and I also worry that when I first talk to people and I'm like, well, we're kind of hard to categorize, that comes off as like really pretentious, and then they have to kind of listen to it and be like, yeah, I don't know what to call that either. But yeah, I think it's always experimenting. I think the music is kind of rooted in experimentation, but not like necessarily like you know like I think there is kind of this like experimental music has its own kind of box of its own kind of rules sometimes of like what people kind of expect that to be too.
Mhm.
Like it's got to be kind of highbrow and you're like, it doesn't really need to be highbrow. So, um I like to that's like I think that's part of some of the experimentation. It's like try to sneak in a little fun. Like Bound, the title song, has a kazoo, and it was written on a kazoo and a ukulele through a karaoke amp. And it's this really like, you know, kind of dark sounding song, but ultimately it was written on all these really silly instruments that I don't know, like the humor in it kind of like I think keeps you humble a little bit from taking yourself too seriously.
Yeah, and it sucks because experimental music kind of has that label on it now. And I've been lucky to speak to, Swans members and Jamie from Juju and all these incredible experimental bits, including yourself. But there's kind of that sound associated with it. So that's why I really appreciate bands like Mount Erie And I think you guys kind of switching that up a little bit because ultimately there's nothing wrong with having that, you know, experimental sound. And I love
Mhm.
it when you experiment with it, like a lot of these, the great names do. But then aside from that, there's a lot of people they are kind of just stuck in that one sound, which kind of ruins the whole point of experimental. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just depends on whatever trip that individual person is at, right?
Hmm.
Like it's like what they're getting out of it, what they're experimenting sort of with.
Exactly.
I think the other reason our stuff shifts is just like it feels like the world has just shifted a lot over the course of the band, right? Like during the pandemic, we were like, well, we can't really make the same. Like I felt like before we had just gotten in this groove of kind of making like, we're gonna make loud, like, you know, raucous kind of songs and or like dark, we were making these like dark, like foreboding kind of songs, and it was like, okay, we don't want to live in that world right now. It's dark and foreboding enough. Like, and I guess like, it's still not exactly what other people would call like happy music, but I think like Parables is more absurd, and that absurdism that snuck in there, like it's a little faster, more absurd. To me, it sounds a little more like you're stuck in your head. That album is definitely like a product of the pandemic and just kind of reacting, kind of shifting as a result of the world and how it living in it feels. Like you don't necessarily always want to make the same type of music just because you're feeling differently, you know?
Exactly. And this decade, and especially I think this year, has been really good for quote unquote happy music
Ah,
with with Juju with like the happiest record to date, with Mount Erie with his happiest or as happy as that can be happiest record.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, Cameron Winter of Geese. I'll be speaking to him later tonight,
Oh,
and I
cool.
got I got his like new record out a little early, and they sent it to me. And that is like a beautiful, heartwarming record, like a very fall record, which is
Yeah,
surprising
yeah,
considering like the background. So I think this year, and Nick Cave with
yep.
his with the Wild God being a very joyous record. This year's been
Yeah, I
great for
haven't
happy
actually, yeah, I
music.
haven't listened to that one yet. I'm excited to, but I've been kind of saving it for when I was like gonna be able to focus on it. So,
Yeah, that one's really. I think that is a really great record. But also, Heavy Moss, which
mm.
is a small band out of Geelong, insane record. A very amazing psychedelic pop record. I can't stop saying enough good things about it. It really is incredible. So I that's definitely what we should ask to viewers check out, and of course, Bound, which is awesome. Or, of course. Um, but yeah, this year's been great for new music.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like on a local level too, this year and last year, like the past like kind of calendar year has been just been like I think of like people I know and they've been putting out some of their best stuff. So
Which is super fun. What have been your favorite releases of like 24?
oh gosh. Well, I'm gonna speak locally, I think, because that's just like my so there's a Philly band Web Chapel um put out a really good album. Um Oldest C, I think that might have been 2023. Uh
Close enough.
yeah, Luxury Skin, that was 2023 too. But those are all we played with Oldest C last night at our album release. It's like this like ethereal but like doomy kind of music. I feel like you'd be into that, and or
I've
like
been loving Doom. Like a
yeah,
lot of Doom. I don't know why. It's kind of just like fit into the fall atmosphere.
yeah,
Very
yeah.
crushing. I've been
Yeah,
loving it.
it's kind of like it's like a warm kind of chilly, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
Like it's chilly outside, but you're inside kind of feeling.
Very cozy,
Yeah.
which is lovely. Yeah, yeah. Local scene has definitely been popping off in Atlanta. It's more hardcore
Yeah,
esque,
okay.
hardcore and scrams. And I've been lucky enough to see one of our most elite. They're named Upchuck. They opened for OCs, and like that was insane.
Huh. Oh, we
Like
played
it
with a
really it
band. Oh, sorry. I was just
yeah.
going on a tangent. I was like, oh, we played with a really cool Atlanta band, and then I realized I don't remember what their name was, which I'm now
Uh
embarrassed about. I'll remember like right after the call.
yeah, I know how that is. But I mean Atlanta's been like very crazy with their scene. And now I think Lucas Abella is gonna come in probably spring, and he's the dude that plays the glass, which is like
Oh.
that's the most experimental it gets, you know?
Hmm.
Like it's insane music. It's
I'll have to
beautiful.
check that out. I don't know. I kind of live under a rock and I'm also really bad with names. So I'm like,
No, I get that.
notes. I'm like, later.
Well, I'll tell you, spoiler.
Today.
I'll tell you a spoiler alert for Lucas's music is that it's not music to some
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
people because it's really just noise, but it's so much fun and really interesting.
I mean, that
Like,
sounds right up my alley.
yeah,
You know,
it's always cool when people can appreciate different types of music, you know?
yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah, yeah.
definitely like a good human trait.
I think
Uh,
it's cool that like this is what we decide to do with ourselves. Like we have all these years of evolution, so that we don't get eaten by bears or whatever, and that we have this way of communicating that like animals don't do, right? It's like
mhm.
very uniquely human and like what it means to us and stuff. I look at my dog sometimes. We've taken her to practice sometimes. We have a basset hound.
Oh, okay, yeah,
And she's really into like the loud sounds. We're not torturing the dog
yeah.
loud sounds.
Yeah,
We don't.
PETA's not gonna come knocking
Yeah.
on your door.
She voluntarily will come in and like fall asleep on it. And it's so strange to look at that reaction because it's she as a dog, she clearly doesn't have much of a sense of like, oh, this is a happy song versus this is like an abrasive song versus like she's just like, oh, noise is happening. I should be where the noise is happening because my humans are there. But yeah, I think that's my tangent, I guess, on I think music's pretty cool.
It's beautiful that humans can do that, and also with the evolution, it shows human evolution, I think, because you see all these other animals that
Yeah.
have like types of communicating, and
Yeah.
it's crazy that that's how we communicate. And maybe they're communicating like that. We just can't. In the same sense that dogs can't sense if a song's happy or sad, maybe
Yeah.
we can't sense if they're doing songs. Maybe to us, like the birds chirping is just like noise, but to them,
Oh
it's like this
yeah.
beautiful, long-winded,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
It's
often
so
wonder what
interesting.
kind of like they could have their own totally separate sense of poetry that we would just have no awareness
And I
of.
feel like they definitely do, honestly. Like
Yeah.
they have to. It makes so much sense. Um,
Yeah. I watch my dog sniffing on the walks and I'm like, you're clearly getting more out of whatever this is than I am. Like, there's a story here.
for sure. And it's crazy like to think that there are these other types of I guess life and like communication that we have just no grasp on.
Yeah.
Like that is so hard to think about. That and like on a very dark topic, I think death is like in that same vein where it's so
Yeah.
hard to like properly hold that
Yeah.
and like think about that. And I think music definitely helps with that.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, to get into some more sad stuff, the first guest list show I was ever at was Swans to interview
Hmm.
Christoph. And literally 2 days before, I've never had a dog, but my neighbor's dog, who is like, my baby, passed
Oh.
away. And
Oh.
it was absolutely terrible. But getting that music, I think, really helped me,
Yeah.
help that healing, help put my mind off of it, and then just that feeling is like 10 times more than it ever would have been without. So I mean, I think it's definitely super interesting.
Yeah.
Music is like the sixth emotion, sixth emotion, sixth sense.
Yeah. I mean, we ended up with we kind of accidentally ended up with a couple of death albums in there, like just due to what was going on.
Yeah.
Aftermath is definitely a grief album. Branches, which is sort of a similar style, but was before that, um, was like my aunt had called the on like Christmas Eve and said that she only had a couple months to live and then asked me to write some music. And I was like, well, I don't have you heard the band? Like, it's not like, I don't know how that's gonna come out, because I wasn't sure, what she had in mind, with that. But it was just kind of just had to go out on the tiny branches and just, my aunt was very kind of a, uh, Pacific Northwest kind of shaman minded person. So that was a I was like, all right, we'll just see what comes out. And so that was all kind of done in like a week because it had to be really done pretty quickly. And then she said we could hold it until after she'd passed to release it. And we weren't sure if that was going to be a Luna Honey record or not. But it was strange within the year to kind of have, or within that short time, have this kind of like anticipatory, and that was my mom's sister, so they both passed the same year. And then so there was this kind of like anticipatory grief
Yeah,
one
yeah.
and then the after one. And sort of it's strange to look back now because like you can have photos from different periods and you can have like kind of writing from different periods, but having the music from those periods, it really does kind of transport you back. It's like a snapshot of the emotions. And
Yeah, for
uh
sure.
yeah, and it feels kind of, for Aftermath for me, was felt really good because it was kind of lets you take those feelings and put them on a shelf, sort of like, or like process. It's like, okay, here is the processing and they're now done. It's like here, and you're never really done, but I think that like kind of being able to externalize some of those like things that and put it somewhere that you can share with other people does feel like this kind of magic.
For sure. And I would liken it to Midsummer, the movie, which is like a very unsettling, very scary movie, but I think the bright colors add to the scariness, but at the same time feel very comforting, you know?
Oh my
And
gosh, that movie is so terrifying.
I I tried watching it with my friends and we got through like an hour and they gave up. So I'm
Yeah.
hoping that tonight I'll be hanging out with them again and I'm hoping that we'll be able to like actually get through it because
Oh man.
it's interesting. Like it really is like a documentary-esque kind of thing.
Yeah, I saw that in a theater on a
In a
date.
theater on a date?
So
That sounds like a recipe for disaster.
it's pretty good, I guess. Yeah. But it was definitely I wouldn't recommend it necessarily as a date night movie.
No, I don't think that's not a very romantic movie, you know. Actually, it's kind of the
No.
opposite. Yeah, it's kind
Well,
of
sometimes
like
scary movies, but I think that one you just leave and you're like, well,
yeah, that I mean,
let's
it's
not
just
talk for the
psychological.
next hour.
Yeah. I think there's some like really amazing horror movies that they
Yeah.
definitely kind of fit in with like Luna Honey vibes,
Yeah, yeah.
like Scream almost,
Oh,
or maybe
that's
like
good.
Terrifier.
So I'm not gonna know any of these because big secret, I am actually a big wimp and I can't watch most scary movies. I like good like Rosemary Baby, like psychological kind of thriller one.
Yeah.
I like have a really low tolerance for gore, which
Well then,
made
yeah, you don't want to
Midsummer
watch
even.
Terrifier. I mean, I'll be honest with you. Me and my friend saw the first and the second one, and we got insanely bored because
Uh-huh.
it's all gore. There's
Oh
no
wow, yeah.
substance to it. And there's a band called Ice Nine Kills. They're kind of like a metal core band, so like very
Hmm.
pop-esque, and they kind of made the music for it, which I think was fitting, but I mean, at the same time, kind of not. You know what I mean? Like you
Yeah.
guys would have maybe the Terrifier producers need to contact you guys and next
Yeah,
soundtrack.
I think it's like I realize it's really off-brand to like be such a prude about like blood and guts on screen, but I think it is just that like that thing where um it like looks very literal to me. Like I think I just don't enjoy watching people pulled apart,
Yeah,
like
which
it's
is not like a
upsetting to
bad thing.
me.
Yeah. Like that kind of is the natural human reaction. I think we've just been so desensitized
I have
that
like a really strong like fight or flight reaction to it. So I usually either leave it like ready to like I'm like, all right, let's go. Like, I don't need my adrenaline turned up anymore.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I totally get that. But you guys would be a great soundtrack band.
Oh yeah. I think that would be really fun. That's kind of on the bucket list of something.
Like an A24 type movie.
Yeah,
That would be really
anything
good.
really. I like I was a big, I like films. And which is a broad thing to say. I like, there's a lot of films I don't like. But I think that would be a fun challenge. Like I'm curious how people go about doing that. And it seems like it'd be a fun process, kind of like one of those things where it's like you do have to kind of like
Yeah.
serve a purpose, right? I like the idea of that as kind of a writing prompt.
But also the stakes are super high. And I think
Yeah.
it's very if you work with the right artist, it'd be perfect. But I know like with James Bond. I don't know if you heard the story with James Bond and Radiohead. When
Oh,
Radiohead was commissioned to make a James Bond theme, and they made one of the most beautiful songs I think they've ever made, called Vector. I think it's called Vector. So, no, it's called Spectre. Spectre, not Vector. Spectre. Really beautiful, scary song, and then they replaced it with what's his name? Freaking the British dude. Anyway, some British guy, like a British pop star, Sam Smith. So they
okay.
replaced Radiohead with Sam Smith to make this very pop soundtrack,
Oh, that
which is like
figures.
crazy,
Yeah.
like absolutely crazy. But I mean, that's I think that's very scary, especially if you're like working with that big of a movie, you know what I mean? That
Yeah,
can
yeah,
definitely
yeah.
be. But our time is nearing to an end because Zoom
Okay.
is,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? I can't pay for Zoom because I don't make money yet, hopefully. But this has been an honor speaking to you. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did because
Yeah, this
this
was
was
really
awesome.
fun.
Uh
I'm super impressed by like I'm sorry I chatted so much about like my dog
no,
walks
it's
and
great.
stuff. Like
I
okay.
love it when people do that.
All
I
right.
love it when people I interview are like ready to speak, and ready to like be themselves, which is perfect. I love that.
Okay.
But thank you so much for, letting us do this, and I hope you have a great day.
Okay, you too. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.